Hi, my name is Chris Cox, and I'm the minister to youth and their families at Woodmont, and this is today's 7 at 7 devotional. And I would like to start off by sharing an admittedly nerdy bit of history with you. So in the years after World War II, the Ku Klux Klan in the United States was doing a membership drive in efforts to attract more people to their hateful cause. The Anti-Defamation League obviously wanted to put a stop to this and expose the Klan for who they were, and so they came up with a creative solution. At that time, one of the most popular radio shows in the country was the Superman radio show. And so the Anti-Defamation League went to the producers of this show with a proposal. What if the Man of Steel took on the villainous Klan in one of their stories? And so in 1946, the 16-part series Klan of the Fiery Cross premiered, and it was a ratings smash. And because children and their parents listened to this story in which their favorite superhero took on this organization, exposing them for the hateful group that they were and demystifying them, it actually did real-life damage to the Klan's prospects. Their recruitment drive was hurt, their membership numbers went down, and I love that because it shows the power of stories in our world. Here is this fictional superhero radio show dealing a real-life blow to a hateful organization. Last year, Gene Luen Yang, who is a MacArthur Foundation Fellow, an acclaimed author, he adapted this radio series into a graphic novel called Superman Smashes the Klan. And I am admittedly a huge Superman fan, and so my parents shipped me this graphic novel as a present for my birthday last week. And I loved it. Like, it is right, well, the only way it could be this mixture of superheroes and justice issues and American history could be more in my wheelhouse is if there was an extended scene in which Jimmy Olsen and Superman talked about theology for a really long time. But otherwise, that's my only note. It was great. And the graphic novel has not been far from my mind since I read it last week. Part of that is the story is fun, and it's beautiful, and it's well told. It's meant for all ages, so it's a great educational resource. But unfortunately, the main reason why it's been on my mind ever since reading it is because the news that has come out this week and on the heels of news that's come out in the last few months have shown me that in terms of issues of prejudice and brokenness and things like that, we are not so far away from 1946. I'm thinking about Ahmaud Arbery, who was killed in Georgia back in February, jogging in his neighborhood. George Floyd, who was killed this past week in Minneapolis, and the protests that have happened after that. These aren't necessarily stories of hooded figures and burning crosses, but they are still stories of systemic racism and prejudice costing people their lives. And it's something that we, as Christians, can't ignore. It's what's going on in the world. If something happens to people in our community, it affects us. And so we need to be listening and be aware and be thinking about ways in which we can help turn the tide on this system that's hurting so many different people. And admittedly, I don't know what to say. I'm in just this worried that I'm going to say the wrong thing. I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to listen to our African American brothers and sisters about what we need to do. We need to listen to the stories because, again, stories matter. And figure out ways in which we can stand alongside and be with those who are hurting. Because this is not a problem that's just going to disappear, and it's all of our problems. And so I've been wrestling with this a lot this past week. And I was actually listening to a podcast interview on the way to church today with religious ethics professor Dr. David Gushee and one of his students, Colin Holtz. And they wrote a book together called Moral Leadership for a Divided Age, which looks at the lives of 14 different leaders through history and what they can teach to us in the super polarized world that we exist in. And something that Colin said really stuck out with me. He said before he went to seminary, he was in the world of politics and did all sorts of different things. And he said that he basically kept hitting wall after wall after wall. He was trying to make the world a better place, and he would go from place to place and place, and he just kept running into these issues that was preventing it. And the thing that he said that really stuck with me, he said, eventually I ran into the point that we're incapable of seeing the face of God in each other. And I don't want to oversimplify issues of racism or the polarization that exists in the world or any brokenness that exists in the world. But I think a lot of it does come down to our incapability of seeing the face of God in ourselves and in other people. Genesis 1:27, it says, God created humanity in God's own image. In the divine image, God created them, male and female, God created them. In Galatians 3:28, Paul looks at divisions within the church in Galatia and reminds them that they're bound together. He says, there is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female. You are all one in Christ Jesus. All of us have this divine spark in us. We all have the face of God in us. You and me, George Floyd, and the people that you sit in traffic with that annoy you, the people in your neighborhood and the neighborhood across town, the people that tick you off because they're not wearing masks or they are wearing masks out in the world, talking heads on TV, people who are on the other side of the world who are as different from us as they can imagine, are all made in the image of God. And we've got to remember that. We got to remember that for ourselves. We got to remember that for our neighbor. At the end of this graphic novel, in the closing pages, Superman is encountering the main bad guy, the main head clan guy, about to bring him to jail and to justice, because that's what happens, and you should bring those people to justice. And he says to him, but he wants him to see the world as he sees it. He wants him to understand that the Lee family, this family of Chinese Americans that he's been terrorizing throughout the story, their value and their worth. And he says to him, Superman says to him, we are bound together. The Lees and I, our friends at the Daily Planet and the Unity House and the police department, everyone down there really. We are bound together by the future. We all share the same tomorrow. That includes even you. Once you've renounced your hate and paid for what you've done, there's always a tomorrow. We are bound together, and we are all made in the image of God. And so my prayer and encouragement for all of us is, let's look for the face of God in one another. And where there are people hurting, let's sit alongside them and grieve. Where there are people crying out for justice, let's listen to them and cry out for justice with them also. But let us move past the brokenness that exists in the world as best we possibly can and see God's image in the face of our neighbor.